Hello everyone. Once again, my name is Ian, the part-time Dungeon Master. Just give me a second to get my book. Alright, there we go. So once again, my name is Ian, the part-time Dungeon Master. I will be your host and guide through today's session and here on Twitch. Once again, if at any point the audio sounds kind of cruddy or choppy or, in and out connections due to my bad internet, you can always catch a clean replay of this over on my YouTube channel, over on Ian, Part-Time DM, over on YouTube. Alright, so let's get started with today's topic, which is actually creating the campaign. The last two, streams, we talked about, the Pantheon of the Gods, how magic and, how to best determine out the sizes of your kingdoms and map them out. So today we are going to be focusing on actually the campaign itself, what your players are going to be doing in this world that you have created for them. And this is also a very important thing because it's pretty much what your players are going to be doing. Remember, not every campaign has to be, saving the world from the end times or stopping some great evil prophecy that has, risen up from ages long past. You can just have something simple and easy. Excuse me. Alright. So, as suggested by the Dungeon Master's Guide, you can always start small, and it's always really good to start small. Essentially start with what I like to say the first 3 or 4 sessions written out, and then go from there. As far as creating an overall grand campaign, I like the idea more of writing out essentially based upon what the players' backgrounds are. So if your players each have, their own unique backgrounds that are intermingled, then that makes things even easier. But if they're not intermingled in the sense that they're just a bunch of schmucks who kind of wandered together and just happened to fight side by side 1 or 2 times and they decided to stick together for now, well then that's perfectly fine as well. You can take and, be sure to sit with each player and talk with them and determine with them what they hope their character eventually achieves, as well as what their character's passions and, what they hope to achieve being, an adventurer, or, what made them leave their hometown, things like that. And you can use that as kind of the basis of creating the rest of the campaign. Let's see. So, normally with most campaigns, you want to start with kind of a home base, a settlement. It's normally, most places they use like a small town or a small village of some sort as just kind of where the players start out. Most times it tends to be a tavern or a bar of some sort. And there's no wrong with using such an old trope. Sure, it's a trope, but, writing itself is tropes. It's just different combinations. It doesn't matter that you can name 50 plus books, movies, or games where there's some chosen, prophesized, foretold hero who saves a damsel in distress princess from the big bad evil guy. It doesn't matter that you can name 50 plus of those. What matters is that you enjoy them individually as stories. So feel free to borrow tropes and ideas from other forms of media and other campaigns and so on, because like I said, it just matters that yourself and your players enjoy them. So, start them out in a home base, a small town, a small fishing village or something. And you want to start thinking of the immediate local area. Not only just the town itself, have it planned out, but I would say probably, what would be considered the next 1 or 2 days ride out from there. The closest landmarks, the most notable area. Perhaps there's a lake nearby, or a jutting mountain, or a scar in the ground from some ancient battle long forgotten. These are things that you want to set out to kind of not only set as a mark of dignity, or not a mark of dignity, a mark of importance, and distinguish this area from all the others that the players could have started in. And as far as, crafting a starting adventure, you can always use modules. There's plenty of modules out there that are published by Wizards of the Coast, as well as modules that are like single cheat modules that you can buy from the Dungeon Masters Guild and other places, to where it's essentially building blocks for you to craft your own starting adventure, or even use one of theirs as a means of getting your players comfortable with each other. Normally, when I do campaigns, I use a module of some sort as a sort of building block. The players start with this module, but then they build up off of that and start going to other, adventures, other forms of travel, and so on. They just go off from there, but for the most part, they start at this little town with this one module. Maybe they got to save the town from a small plague of blighted mushrooms. Maybe they have to rid the town of goblins or orcs or something nearby. But the fact is, start small and use it as a build-up for the players to not only get more comfortable with each other, but also for their characters to get more comfortable with each other. This is also very good if you have new players, as it gives them a chance to sort of ease into the game at their own pace. And as you start to, develop your campaign, you'll need to fill the players in on the basics of where they're starting. You need to sort of set the stage. Any restrictions or new options for character creations, any information in the backstory for the campaign or the world that they would know about, such as, in the Surskin campaign, I let them know about the gods, the organizations, the major influences or major influencers of the world at the moment. I let them know about what homelands they came from, things like that. They would also have to know basic information about the area that they're starting in, such as with the Surskin campaign, they started in the town of Heldas. And, the town of Heldas was just a small logging town on the border of Aloria, Valencia, and Talnion. They struck a deal with the Lady of the Forest to where they could harvest from the forest, so long as they paid her tribute and did not overtake from the forest. These are, important things that you need for the immediate area that they're starting in. Also, be sure to make them aware of important NPCs, as far as like the lord over the town or the mayor or something. And, keep this as kind of like a small pamphlet, a player's pamphlet or a handout, for them to easily access at any time. And then, of course, as always, you need to involve the characters or the players with essentially the world that you're giving them, the campaign that you're giving them. For example, perhaps one of the characters has a mystery that they're trying to solve. They're looking for clues constantly. Maybe someone in the town, a hermit or a sage, has something that could point them in the right direction, but he's not willing to give it up to them immediately. Perhaps it's tied to something much larger, and once he trusts the players, he'll give it to them. Or you could even, ask the players, are you a native born and raised in the area? Or are you a foreigner newly traveled in who's trying to learn as much as they can? And if you're a foreigner, where did you come from? What was the village life or, your life before you came here? Also, are you tied to any of the major organizations that I had stated? You need to listen to your players for not only their backstories and, any particulars that they have about their character, but also for ideas, because there's been plenty of times where my players caught me off guard and suggested something, and I'm like, yes, that's a great idea. We're going to go with that now. Because the whole Dungeons and Dragons thing is building off of your imagination and running with it. So sometimes you might have something really nice planned, but the players have this one wild idea in their head, and they're going to go with that instead. Excuse me. And then there's backgrounds. Backgrounds are designed to root the player characters in the world. So you not only have to have, backgrounds for the, characters themselves, obviously, of their hometowns, of their previous lives, adventures that they've already been on, the loss of loved ones, the gaining of loved ones, or perhaps they're seeking to protect something. These backgrounds are extremely important, but also at the same time, they are, like I said, they are important to the rest of the campaign, especially if you're, creating the campaign and crafting it from their backgrounds. Perhaps one of them is seeking a lost relic of his holy order, and so part of the campaign has to deal with the said relic. Perhaps another group is searching for it as well, or perhaps the relic has been corrupted, and the only way for it to become uncorrupted is for him to retrieve it and bring it back to his holy order. Perhaps the priests of a certain religion live as beggars, supported by a pious populace. There are a lot of different things that you need to decide to take from your players' backgrounds and add them as historical or flavor to your current campaign. Why does he decide to travel? Well, his, like I said, the priests are essentially beggars. They don't keep anything for themselves. Any money they get goes straight to the church. So he's traveling to try and find more revenue for his church, so that way they can help those who need it. Another thing is, not only planning out, your campaign as far as the overall arching things, but also the events themselves, when are essentially key events in your campaign. And just with comedy, comedic timing is everything. Dramatic timing is everything in Dungeons and Dragons. You have to know when to put things into motion, when to shake things up, and when not to shake them up. As such, if you are only 3 sessions in and the big bad evil guy, pops up, declares his entire plan and everything, and, proclaims to the players that they have no hopes of ever stopping him, well, then, you kind of popped the lid a little too early. You didn't build up enough suspense. So that's a good example of not shaking it up, or shaking it up too early. As far as putting events into motion, you can actually just start this at any time in the campaign or the story arc, but of course you want the biggest parts of it being in the middle and in the end. And of course, at the beginning, which will be the hook that gets the players, dragged into the rest of them. There, of course, could be more than just these 3, but these are the main ones you want to focus. The hook at the beginning that gets the players onto the main plot line, the middle that keeps them interested into the plot line, as well as possibly even helps define their characters more, because character evolution and character arcs are something encouraged in Dungeons & Dragons, as it's sort of like helping write the adventure. And of course, at the end of the story, when the players either succeed or fail. Excuse me, got my drink. And of course, as I said, dramatic timing is everything, just like comedic timing is everything in comedy. And also, be very careful of what is known as a false action. Building up tension and drama for just pretty much ends up being a fart in the wind. There's nothing really sustenance to it. It's just, here we had all this tension for nothing, because that'll end up just frustrating your players more than anything. And, as an example of, world-shaking events that could possibly happen, during, the beginning, the middle, or the end of the campaign that help bring the players onto the hook is, they have good examples here in the Dungeon Master's Guide, such as rise of a leader or an era, the fall of a leader or an era, a cataclysmic disaster, the assault or invasion, rebellion, revolution, or overthrow, extinction or depletion, New organization, discovery, expansion, invention, prediction, omen or prophecy, myth, and legend. They have a nice little chart here. You could just roll a d10 and it gives them to you. Now, here's a very key thing. When looking at each of these are all very good, essentially, writing points. So when you're deciding, okay, I want perhaps a political mystery kind of beginning, or a political mystery type of campaign, well then I definitely don't need cataclysmic disaster, or prediction, omen, or prophecy, or myth and legend. I don't need those ones. The rise or the fall of a leader or an era, that's definitely good. The assault or invasion, that's also, pretty good. Perhaps a neighboring kingdom is, on the brink of war and it spreads to this kingdom. Or rebellion, revolution, and overthrow. Perhaps the players themselves are trying to overthrow those who are in political power to try and right the wrongs of the kingdom. Extinction or depletion can be, marked out. New organization, perhaps, there's new kids on the block trying to become movers and shakers of the world themselves. Discovery, expansion, invention, that can actually kind of be marked out. But you see what I mean, use the type of campaign that you're going to be writing. Is it a political, intrigue? Is it more straightforward and about good old-fashioned hack and slashing Dungeons and Dragons? Use that, as well as the world-shaking events, and use it as a form of, I guess, kind of like a mathematic calculation. Which one goes better with which to get the best result. Of course, there's the leader types, political, religious, military, crime, underworld, art, culture, philosophy, learning, and magic, but that's not important. Now, once again, when it comes to these world-shaking events, they are for the beginning, the middle, and the end of the campaign, and they help define the campaign. You want the beginning one to be something that really impacts the players in some fashion or another, so that way the players feel motivated. It's like, oh, no, we need to do this. We need to go and get on this as quickly as possible. Now, that being said, the plot hook does not have to happen on session 1. Now, you can have the plot hook happen on later sessions once the players have enough, power under their belt. And then the plot hook actually hits them. Say if, it's about an invasion or an assaulting force from a neighboring kingdom, and that's what the campaign's actually about. Well, sure, they could be conscripted at level 1 by, the local landlord, or the local lords and nobles and so on. Or it could happen just as they're starting to get a name for themselves around town. Perhaps they've become folk heroes in the kingdom. And the kingdom then comes to them. It's like, hey, we heard you've been doing good dealing with orcs and ogres and trolls. Well, we need your help fighting this war, because they also use ogres in their ranks. And we need heroes like you in order to take back the front and push them out of our kingdom. So that's something to keep in mind. It's like, over the first couple of levels, you could have it to where they are just essentially being folk heroes, where they're going around doing a lot of good for the towns or the countryside of the kingdom that's a little too far away from the guards to actually be of great help. And then once they got enough name of themselves, then have the first plot hook beginning world-shaking event happen, and it pulls the players in, either by their renown or perhaps by their sense of having to do good. Let's see. This is just more of, the basic stuff, going through, examples of how to use each of these world-shaking events. Now, another thing that I've noticed not a lot of people use when it comes to their campaigns is the tracking of time. They don't really seem to understand well, not really understand. They don't really seem to put a lot of thought into the passage of time of like how long an adventure takes, not in real world, but into the fantasy world. Some people do. I have myself have been one of those individuals who decides to make a calendar for my fantasy world and plan out how the moon phases go and everything. And it, to me, feels like a good indication of how long my players have been on this adventure. Say, if it takes them a week and a half to travel from the small little town that they're in into the main capital of the kingdom, then of course I want to track, the actual days that they travel and so on. And if it's getting closer and closer to winter, perhaps, they might have to start getting supplies for colder weather versus, the supplies that they've been wearing. There's also some other reasons. The reasons other than, of course, the obvious seasons, is that there's religious observances in our world. There's the Jewish holidays, there's the Muslim holidays, there's the Christian holidays, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, your world that you've created with the gods, goddesses, deities, and pantheons and so on most likely have their own days of worship. Perhaps they have certain days that are similar to our Lent, or perhaps they have days where you are supposed to fast because you're paying homage to this god. These holy days throughout the calendar also they not only help define the calendar and also make this world seem more real to yourself and to your players, especially the player playing the cleric, because these holy days can also mean an extra quest for them or for the group, or even more depth for their character to do things. But it also has a lot of significance when it comes to the kingdoms, because not every kingdom worships the same things, therefore they might not observe the same days. And have the kingdoms that do observe these days, perhaps have it be a big event. Perhaps the players can get items for a little bit cheaper because everyone's celebrating this, the God of the Forges day. So therefore, items that are made from a forge are 20% off and so on. There's also fantastic events. Your world is not what we would consider normal. It's not a mundane world. It is a fantasy world. So there might be, every winter spirits erupt from a nearby castle for one reason or another. No one really knows why. But all they know is that these extraordinary events, they are not quite explained in this world just yet, because it's a fantasy world. And they also move on a timetable of their own, separate from the players. The players might hear, like, in 3 days, the nearby castle is going to go, start glowing for some, unknown reason. Well, if the players decide to come back 4 days from now, they're not going to see the glow because they missed it. The world moves with or without the players. And these, fantastical events, these extraordinary events, help make the world seem more real. And, you might hear me say that a lot, making the world seem more real, because you are dedicating a large amount of time to making this world interesting to your players. So you want this world to be interesting. You want it to seem more realistic in the sense that they can better picture and imagine it in their minds. And of course, there's the end of the campaign, which all basically comes down to when your players decide to, or yourself decides when the end of the campaign is. Perhaps they finally strike down the big bad evil guy, or take over the kingdom and, turn it towards a better righteous path. These are things that you have to consider, but you don't have to consider at the very beginning of the campaign, if you catch my drift. More of have a general idea as how you want the campaign to end, but don't really worry about how the campaign ends until you're about 3 sessions away from it ending. I find that way it's better, so that way I don't have to, hope that my players go the exact route that I want them to go, because we all know that players at times will just suddenly go elsewhere. Because why not? And that's pretty much everything as far as like the campaign itself, as far as preparing for it, tracking the time, what kind of world-shaking events and what play style the campaign is going to be, because there's different play styles. There's the adventurers kick in the door and fight everything, hack and slash. There's the political turmoil, immersive storytelling. There's mixtures in between, and this is all based upon what your players want to play. If your players want to play something that's kind of a mix between the two, or perhaps they want to play just a basic hack and slash, you need to talk with your players and make sure that you are trying to dungeon master and give them exactly what they want. Otherwise, it'll just seem kind of forced upon them. Perhaps they just want to do hack and slash, but you're making them sit through these long monologued nobles talking about birthrights and stuff. And you also have to remember that there are different types of fantasy when it comes to these campaigns. There's heroic fantasies, there's sword and sorcery, there's epic fantasies, mythic fantasies, that even the gods themselves at some part might fear the players. There's dark fantasy where everything's kind of dreary and, hopeless. There's, intrigue of, politics and, backdoor bureaucracy. Mystery, such as, following after the trail of a thief that had stolen legendary items. There's swashbuckling, which is always fun. There's war. There's a number of different types of play styles and flavors of fantasy that you can use when it comes to your campaign and what you want to give your players. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today, and thank you very much, everyone, for listening and tuning in. I will be streaming again tomorrow if I can, and once again, if at any point the audio had been cutting in and out, you can catch a replay of this one and any other of my videos, including D20 Sundays, which is every Sunday, on my YouTube channel over on Ian Part-Time DM. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.